So let's have a look at the paper and the first question. Most 2-unit papers and all 2-unit science papers start off with multiple choice, and for the most part, these first questions are generally designed to be a little bit easier here. And across the state, most students engaged well and did quite well on this question. And so when we have a look at it, company is hired to analyse data collected from surveillance cameras in a workplace. The aim of the analysis was to see what factors distracted workers on an assembly line. The workers knew this study was being undertaken. Now that is the important part. They knew what was going on. Now, of course, that is a direct part aspect out of the syllabus. And what would researchers need to take into effect when analysing this evidence? So they're all effects. And if you're even not sure about what's going on in this question, have a look at the answers and you might be able to make it a little bit easier on yourself. Particularly if you go down here, look, the halo effect. Well, if you're not sure what that is, that might be something you think. But you look at the Mozart effect, and we know Mozart, of course, is a famous composer. The Doppler effect, with the Mozart, we'll get rid of that. The Doppler effect, hopefully you remember that that's just something from physics, and you've probably learnt about that in terms of race cars and sirens and ambulances. And so, of course, then, if nothing else, you've actually broken yourself down to two choices, halo effect and Hawthorne effect. And hopefully you remember that the halo effect is just essentially when advertisers and people wanting to promote things use someone famous or well known. So in that case there, we can get rid of that. And of course, we then get the Hawthorne effect. Okay, so now we move on to question 2. Now, question 2 is essentially just asking about methodology. So what method was used to confirm the existence of the Higgs boson? Now look, you don't even really need to understand what a Higgs boson is. It is part of the syllabus, it is there, but really it's not here. It's more about methods. And the one thing you probably need to think about here is the main thing you need to know about the Higgs boson. It was discovered at the Large Hadron Collider. And so the Large Hadron Collider is essentially the largest piece of scientific equipment on the planet. So in this case here, it's not really field work. We're not going out into there and asking things, and we're not conducting a survey. Like, we're not going and asking people what we feel about it. Data analysis and experiments. That sounds pretty good. And locating and using information sources. Now this one is definitely not, because that is using secondary source information. At least these first two ones here are first-hand methods here. So when you look at that, essentially the best answer for this is data analysis from experiments. And, as I said before, you don't even have to really know too much about the Higgs boson to get that as your answer. Okay, question 3. Now moving on to the idea of research, peer-reviewed research, and how scientists do that. Now, of course, one of the key things we've got to think about here is the fact that we are, first of all, looking at peer-reviewed research paper, and probably the research paper is the most important thing here, and when information about the purpose. Okay, so when we are doing this, what we really need to be doing is thinking of what the different parts down here. So we've got the abstract. Now the abstract, of course, you remember its purpose is to give you information. So the first thing there, my first thing would be, well, maybe that's a very good possibility. So we'll think about that one. Citations. Well, citations we're going to get rid of, because essentially your citations are your references, where you got your information from. Your method, well, that's describing what you did, so we're going to get rid of that. And your results are what you found. So essentially what we have now is that just by a bit of deductive reasoning, A is the correct answer, which is, of course, what it is. Okay, now let's have a look at question 4. Now we've got a bit of information here. We are talking about the geological history. We've got a bit of information that the Earth is 4,500 million years old. And what we need to do is interpret this graph. And so what we're going to do, we need to know about the Archean eon. And so that's there. And so what we are looking at is this little section in here. Now, what we have to do first of all is think, well, the total here is going to be 4.5. That total around the entire thing is 4.5 million years. So half of that, if we're going to say that, half of this graph is going to be that there, we're going to have a value of 2,250. And so what we've got here is, first of all, we know that the period we're looking at here is less than half. D is more than half. So that is gone. The other thing we can need to make a judgment about is, well, 2,100 million years is very close to that there. This looks as though it's pretty much significantly less than that. So we can also get rid of C. Now that brings us down to two possibilities, A and B. Now what we can do here is to say, well, we may think it's B, but A is going to be less than a quarter. This is more than a quarter. Therefore, our best answer here is probably going to be B, which of course is what we get from the paper. Okay, let's move on to question 5. Now, we're talking here about a question that actually wasn't answered that well across the state. What seemingly looks like an easy question was actually quite misinterpreted by a lot of students, and it's quite easy to see how that is. So let's have a look at the question. What factor allowed the vaccine to be so successful in eradicating smallpox? Now, this is one of the most important parts of the question, eradicating smallpox. The fact it was successful, and, well, we know it's a vaccine. So let's have a look at each of these parts here. A, the vaccine could be given to dairy cows to create herd immunity. That's irrelevant, and that's also not how this vaccine program works. The vaccine wasn't given to dairy cows, it was given to humans. And herd immunity, while you can refer to cows as herd, it is a generic term used in disease and language because it's talking about humans getting as much immunity in the community as possible. Let's have a look at B. Smallpox was not found globally, so only small localized populations needed the vaccine or needed vaccination. It was found globally, so that first part here is false, and it was across the planet. The vaccine was given in every country in the world so that it would be completely and utterly eradicated. Let's have a look at C. Smallpox was only found in human populations, so there were no reinfections from other animals. Now, that sounds like a good point there. It's found in humans. Cowpox had cowpox. Chickens have chickenpox. So that sounds plausible. Let's have a look at the last one. D. The vaccine protected immunized people from cowpox since vaccinated people developed antibodies to smallpox. Now this is the answer that I think most people got confused with, and I think this is the answer that was mostly selected. Now this is a case here where you've got to be very careful with the way the words are done here. The vaccine protected immunized people from cowpox. Now, you could argue that that's kind of correct because it did include cowpox, or at least the original versions did. They've been developed a lot since vaccinated people developed antibodies to smallpox. Now, the problem with this answer here is that it's kind of linking two different things. Cowpox and smallpox are different diseases. People didn't develop antibodies to smallpox if they got cowpox. they developed antibodies to cowpox, which prevented that there. So really, part D kind of is wrong. It didn't protect you from cowpox. It protected you from smallpox because you developed antibodies to cowpox. If those two words here were around the other way, we might be talking different here. So in this case here, the answer, the best answer is C. Question 6. A question here where you've got a bit of information here in the middle, and then you've got to work that out there. So what we need to do, let's look at the context. A student at home wished to remove nail polish from their fingers, but only had acetone available. The student consulted a safety data sheet. Now, of course, most of you know, most things like nail polish remover pretty much are acetone. They've just got some other things there. So one of the things here is we've got this entire data sheet here. And we've got to look here at the question, which is the best action the student could take to minimize the risk of using acetone as a nail polish remover? And really important here is this thing at home. And so when we have a look at the answers here, let's have a look here. Have running water available. Every home, or most homes, have running water anyway. But in terms of here, potential hazards, the hazards here irritates the eyes. There's a danger of fire because it's flammable. And it's not just the liquid, it's also the vapor. And it can cause, again, it irritates the eyes and causes serious eye irritation. So let's have a look here. In case of this here, having running water available isn't really necessary for this. B, wear gloves and safety glasses. Now, that's something that I think is possibly what a lot of students put on here. So the question across the state was about half the students only got this right. And let's have a look here. The idea, safety glasses, you might be able to say, well, yeah, you need safety glasses because it irritates the eyes. However, if you're cleaning your fingernails, you can't be wearing gloves. So this part here in particular kind of eradicates all that there. Now, C, use acetone in a fume cupboard. Well, if you're in a science lab, great. I don't know how many people have fume cupboards at home. So really, when we get down here, keep acetone away from naked flames. That's a naked flame. Keep the acetone away from it. And that way, you'll be safe at home. Okay, question 7. Okay, we're having a look here at an advert. We're going to talking about toothpaste, which of course is a common advert there, and that 80% of dentists recommend it. And so we're making a claim here, and this investigators found that a total of 6 dentists have been surveyed. Okay. One dentist becoming sick during the studies could not finish it. So let's have a look here at what we've got here. Now, what we need to think about here, two main things: sample size and advertising claim. Now, I think the really easy part here is saying, well, if you're making a gross claim or a grandiose claim and you're only doing 6 dentists, your sampling size is too small. So what we can do here is we can just get rid of C and D straight away. Now, what we also need to think about here is, okay, brands claim 80% recommend it. Now, of course, one of the things here is, one, you got a small size, so it's one of these two here. And really, it is definitely a misleading claim. They don't say why they recommend it, they just say they do. And the one that didn't recommend it was sick. Really, it's too small and it's really misleading. So effectively what you get there is that it's a misleading claim, too small sample size, That's the way advertising works, unfortunately. Question 8. So we're moving into the world of pseudoscience here, and we're talking about iridology to start off with, which you've gone through the course, and iridology is trying to use the iris to ascertain health and things like that. So they're shown photographs, 39 people, and they've got gallstones. And then another 39 without gallstones. So we've got a total of 78 in our survey. So the iridologists need to identify, only from the photos, whether people had gallstones or not. And of course, if the claims of iridology are true, then you think that they could. So each of them identified about half of the gallstone sufferers. However, they identified a different set of people. So what you've got there is things where the people have gone through, and yeah, they've got about half right. But if you think about that from probability, if you're going to guess anything, you're probably going to be right half the time anyway. So let's have a look at the possible answers here. A, consistent with random guessing by the iridologists. Now, to me, that sounds like a pretty good possibility. Results show that iridologists can diagnose diseases by looking at the iris. Now, you look at that and you think, well, if they could do that, then they probably would have identified most of the people with gallstones. So we're going to get rid of that answer because obviously that's incorrect. Results could be made more valid by increasing the number of iridologists. Now, you got to think here the word valid. So when we're talking generally about validity, we're talking about whether your method is answering your aim. You might, if you substituted in there reliability, that could possibly be there. But in this case here, it's not more valid. And the fact is that it's quite a valid thing anyway, quite a valid investigation anyway. Now, the results can be more reliable by increasing the number of photographs. In this case here, not particularly. You could argue that, I think, to some extent. However, at what point do you say there's more? When you really break this down, you really look at it, it pretty much looks like A is the correct answer, because each iridologist guessed about half, and they guessed a different group of people each time. So in this case here, what we have is that we've got results that are consistent with random guessing. Have a look at question 9. Now, what we are doing here is we're looking at this idea of claims, food, healthcare. So it's basically claims made in adverts. And which claims suggests it's a result of evidence-based research? And that's the thing there, like, is it backed up by anything? Now let's have a look at the ideas here. So let's have a look at the first one. A, antioxidants. We know that they're a class of chemicals which are thought to help with things like cancer. And superfood. Now, of course, that superfood thing there, little bit funny, but it's something. Well, maybe we say maybe that is potentially something. May improve blood circulation. Now, this idea of may do it, it's not really saying anything. It's just saying, well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So let's get rid of that answer, because really it's just saying there, it's almost like a faith. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. C, believed to improve oxygen delivery. Well, belief is not something we're looking at here. Now, let's look at D, absorbed in half the time of standard aspirin. Now, that's something that sounds like a really good answer. And let's have a look here, absorbed in half the time. So by giving you sort of a quantitative number, or a quantitative value, or even though we're not giving you the actual thing there, that suggests that there's some experiments that have been done on it. So in that case there, we can say, well, this one here, which we kind of sounded all right, we're going to get rid of that there. I'm going to say, The answer is actually going to be D, because it actually refers to the fact that there was time, so that suggests that an experiment has been done. And then we have a look at that there, and we can actually just sort of confirm that that is the answer we're after. Let's move to question 10. Now, interesting little question here. We've got a couple of things here. We've got popular, movie star. So it's suggesting that we're moving into the area of influencing people. Successful, so that's the thing there. So it worked for a new smartphone. So we're going to look here. What's the main reason for using this actor in the campaign? Now, one of the things there, you'll should be able to remember that this is part of the halo effect. The fact that people in general will buy something if they feel some sort of connection to the star. And that kind of inexplicably explains the Kardashians, who are famous for just being famous and yet somehow are able to sell a lot of crap. Now, let's have a look here. Part A. General public's perception of the actor would make the phone more desirable. Now, things here. Perception of the actor. And so that's saying there that the actor is the reason people are doing that. So let's just put a little mark there. That sounds like a good answer. Let's have a look here. B. Actor would have been backed by peer-reviewed evidence. Peer-reviewed evidence doesn't say that. And generally, there's not many actors out there who are doing peer-reviewed studies. The actor would have been able to speak authoritatively to the general public on the merits of this phone. We don't know that. The actor, as it says there, we don't know that. There's nothing there to tell us that. General public's perception of the actor would allow them to make a more informed choice of the phone. There's nothing there about informed choice. It's just saying that there was an actor that was well known and attractive and all that blah blah blah. Essentially, the actor has no. We don't know if the actor has been involved in stuff like that in the past. There's nothing to suggest that. Basically, the reason the actor's involved is because their perception is positive, and by having a positive perception, that helps sales, which is, of course, what our answer is going to be.